I'm going to introduce Professor Spillane. So Professor Spillane is, to me, usually Annie or Anne. She's our secretary, actually. We're very, very lucky to have her. She comes to our CAC meetings. We have a meeting once a month where we speak with administrators. And she usually is there, even given her very busy schedule. She is a professor with what has recently become the University of Massachusetts Global, was previously Brandman University. And she is a professor of special education, and she's here to teach us something about SMART goals. It's always hard to understand IEP goals. They seem to be written in another language, and we have a translator here with us. So thank you very much, Professor Spillane, I should say. And take it away.
Yeah, I tend to be much more of a casual person. So please feel free to call me Anne or Annie. You're not my students and I'm not grading you. So this is casual. I put together a PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and share that now. But really a lot of this is for you and to help you understand IEP goals so that you can really feel confident in being part of that IEP team and knowing that you can contribute and you can be part of it and understand what's going on and what people are talking about, and just to help you hopefully build that confidence that it's going to help you to feel comfortable being a really active participant part of the team, because the IEP team, you as a parent and your child as appropriate are vital members of that team. And so the more you can participate in the collaborate, the more successful your child's going to be, because everybody's going to be on board and being on the same page. At the same time, IDEA, IEPs, there's a lot of law, right, that surrounds that and says what must be on the IEP, how things have to be written. So sometimes it can be really confusing, right, to try and translate what's going on and what all this means. So tonight, I just want to spend a little bit of time just kind of trying to help you feel more comfortable and understand that language, translate that language so that you can then feel more comfortable contributing and even suggesting IEP goals of your own that you think would be important for your child. So we're going to talk about SMART goals. But first, I kind of want to back up just because I'm not sure where everybody is at and really talk about what are IEP goals. When we say, oh, these IEP goals, what are they? What does that mean? IEP goals are based on present levels of performance, and that's one of those mandated pieces that's on an IEP. We call them present levels of performance, what the child can do now, what their strengths are, what their needs are. So when you're looking at present levels of performance, IEP goals come from those. Present levels of performance should do a few things. They should be written as a narrative, but they should give some detailed information, right, about what your child can do, right, what they're already doing, what their strengths are. And then they should also identify areas of need. And when I'm working with students, candidates who are learning to become teachers, one thing I always talk to them about is, if you state something as a need in the present levels of performance, then that's a signal that there should be a goal to address that. Now, of course, we don't write goals for every area of need, because sometimes we have to take care of certain things first and work on certain things first and build those skills. So or sometimes things are, it's a situation where maybe, an example I often use is like toilet training, where if there's a medical reason where a child is not going to be able to be toilet trained, at least at this time, then you might state that, but you state it in neutral terms, not as an area of deficit or an area of need. So IEP goals always come from those present levels of performance. They're individualized to meet the student's needs, and they really do determine what areas will be addressed, but also what supports and services will be provided, right? So when we're reading and looking at those present levels of performance, and when we're contributing to having those built, you really do want to think about, what's my kid good at, right? What's his strengths? What can he do already? And then what are some areas of need that really need to be addressed in this IEP in the school? IEP goals are written for 1 year. So when we're looking at an IEP goal, you want to remember that this goal is meant to be addressed and hopefully achieved in a 1 year period. So that also kind of affects that present levels of performance and what we're identifying as areas of need, because we want to identify things that can be tackled in a year's time, hopefully. Now, they're written for 1 year, but progress needs to be reported on them. And this is what the law says, at least as often as progress is reported for students in general education. Generally, that translates to when it's report card time and report cards are sent home, you as a parent should be getting a progress report on how your child is doing on all of their IEP goals. Okay? Every year, the law says, it's an annual IEP. Every year, the team gets together, reviews the goals, determines what progress was made or not, whether a goal should be continued with revisions, whether what new goals should happen, or whether, and sometimes even whether this is no longer an area of need and we can move forward. However, sometimes when we write goals or we have an idea for goals, sometimes we maybe are too ambitious or not ambitious enough. So even though they're updated yearly at a minimum, if ever a goal becomes no longer relevant, it is fine to actually update or change an IEP as part of an addendum meeting. So you just, that meeting is scheduled to change or revise IEP goals. Sometimes it's for services or other things. So it's yearly at a minimum, but you're not stuck with a bad goal or a non-relevant goal or something that changed for a full year. If you get partway through the year and you realize, hey, this isn't really where we need to be, you can change that goal, do an addendum, and change it to be more relevant. So now when we talk about IEP goals and we talk about SMART goals, SMART goals were actually first established back in the 80s, and they were written for business and management as ways for businesses to really be setting better goals for their companies and their employees. But since then, they've really expanded to other areas and schools and lots of things, including special education. So when we say SMART, SMART is an acronym, and it stands for S is specific. So we're talking about goals that target a specific area for improvement. So we're thinking about those specific areas that we want that goal to address. SMART goals are M, measurable. They need to be quantifiable. Progress needs to be measured objectively. They need to be observable. They need to be measurable. A is achievable. Right? It's always better to shoot for the stars, so you don't aim for the stars, so you don't shoot yourself in the foot. But at the same time, you don't want to be setting up a situation where there's a lot of frustration that's going on, because we're simply not, it's simply, we're not there yet. And so you want to think about them as being achievable. So that's why thinking about that 1 year period. What do we think we can do in this next year? Maybe you've got a longer term goal in mind, right? Your 2-year goal, your 5-year goal, even your 10-year goal of the direction that you're hoping and you want you and your child and your family to head. But then you think about breaking that down into, well, where are we now and what can we get done in this year, so that we're writing achievable goals. R is for relevant. So you want them to align with the strengths and needs of the individual. When I think about SMART goals, I also think about strength-based goals. And we're going to talk about that a little later, but really thinking about how you can use the child's strengths, and every child has strengths, to help them improve in areas of need. Relevant also means that they're related to the Common Core state standards where appropriate. So when we're looking at academic goals, we want to be relating them to the Common Core state standards, even if we're just taking a little piece of that standard and addressing that little piece of the standard. And then finally, T, time-based, set a realistic time when they're completed. So a year, but sometimes it's a little, sometimes it's less than a year, or sometimes you may even break that goal down, especially when you have students who have more extensive support needs. Sometimes then we actually break the goals down into specific objectives that build to that goal. So we're thinking about breaking that goal down even further into pieces, and we measure progress that way. So that's what the acronym stands for, and that's what we mean when we say SMART goals. Now,
quick question from chat.
Yeah.
Shantanu says, is my understanding correct that though the IEP can be updated yearly or sooner, any assessments carried out by the school district which inform the content of the IEP only happen every 3 years?
Yes and no. So every 3 years, there needs to be a triennial assessment. And that assessment, that triennial assessment, is to determine whether or not the student still is eligible for special education and is in the appropriate placement. However, when we're looking at assessments, those are those standardized assessments like, your Woodcock-Johnson or your Wyatt, that are often norm referenced, maybe criterion referenced. Sometimes though, those standardized tests can actually be given every year, especially the academic ones. When we're looking at some of those qualifying ones in that broader range of assessments that are often done to see if a child is eligible, and then to see if they continue to remain eligible and remain appropriately placed. That happens every 3 years, but it's not uncommon for an academic standardized test to be given on a yearly basis. They can't be given more than every year. They can, but then you have to use whether you're doing the A or the B test, because if you give them more than once a year, then they're not considered to be valid and reliable, because it's possible the student could remember. So, and there's other assessments that are also given. So for example, if we're looking at response to RTI, right? Response to intervention, then that can actually be used based on the tiers and the supports to qualify students for special education. And those kinds of assessments are done more frequently. Districts use that in different ways. Most often we're looking at those standardized assessments for qualifying, but you can give some of those standardized assessments, particularly the academic achievements, on a more regular basis. Did that answer the question, I hope?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me go back here to the IEP goal components. So when we think about how a goal is put together, in order for that goal to really be legal and meet all the things, there are 3 components that it has to have: the condition, the behavior, and the criteria. The condition is the condition that addresses the circumstances needed for the goal, right? It's what needs to be in place for us, for the student to do what we want them to do, right? Are there specific materials? Is there some curriculum? Is it going to happen at a certain time or a certain place, right? Under what conditions is this goal going to be implemented and measured, right? So it might be during lunchtime, or given, an 8th grade reading passage, or throughout during transition times during the day, given a number of math problems. So it's really giving the parent and the teacher information about the circumstances and the conditions under which this goal will be done. What are the materials that are needed? It's important that this information is specific. You don't necessarily want to call out specific curriculum tools, although sometimes you can, but you do want them to be as specific as possible, because Sometimes a teacher has to move in the middle of the year and somebody else comes in. You want it to be specific enough that anybody reading that IEP understands what's needed for the student to be able and for the teacher to be able to address this goal. So that's that condition piece. The behavior states exactly what the student will do in observable, measurable terms. That means it has to be something that can be seen and can be measured. You can't see somebody understand something, right? How do you know? No light bulb appears on top of their head, right? So you want to make sure that when you're talking about the behavior is very specific and it's something that can be both observed and measured. The other important thing is the IEP goal is what the student will do, not what the teacher will do, not what the parent will do, not what any other support provider will do. It is what the student will do. Now, it may be based on condition. What the teacher will do can be part of the condition, but the behavior is what the student will do. And then finally, you need to know, how do you know if the goal is met? Right? So the criteria establishes that in terms of things like accuracy, right? With 100% accuracy or 80% accuracy or 70% accuracy, the level of independence, whether they needed prompting or whether they can do it completely independently, how long they're going to do it for. Are they going to do something for 10 minutes or 30 minutes? Are they going to do it across the day? And then the other piece of it is you often, if a student does something once, did they meet that goal? Does everybody get to say, woohoo, right? Because it's possible that maybe they kind of fluked it this time, right? So you often want to see that repetition or that replication of the skill to know that the student really does have that understanding as has met the goal. So you're often talking about number of trials or opportunities. And then finally, how will it be measured, right? You want data. We want to see data because data informs instruction, data informs and lets us know how the student is progressing towards meeting this goal. You don't want it a situation where the teacher goes, oh yeah, he can read that now. Like I remember he's reading 8th grade chapter books just fine, right? I've seen him do it, right? You want clear data. So you're always looking for that, how it will be measured, and you want it to be in a way that is going to generate some clear data that will help inform progress and inform instruction. Okay, so those are those IEP components, those goal components that we look at. Now, how do those goal components align with SMART goals? Well, your condition, you want it to be specific, you need it to be relevant, and sometimes it's time bound as well, right? How long something's going to happen, when it's going to happen. The behavior needs to be specific. It needs to be measurable, it needs to be achievable, and it needs to be relevant to the student. Again, for that, we're always going back to those present levels of performance. Is it relevant to those areas of need that we identified in the present levels of performance on the IEP? And that present levels of performance, you want to talk about that, and that should be talked about in kind of layman's terms, right? If you're seeing present levels of performance that's just a bunch of data and test scores, ask for more information, right? What does that mean in a narrative format? What is the child's strengths and what are their areas of need? Because these goals relate back to that, and that's how you know that what is being done is relevant. And then finally, the criteria also needs to be specific. It's how you measure. You want to think about that criteria in terms of thinking about it in a way that we know it will be achievable, or at least more likely to be achieved. And then the time-bound piece is there in there as well. When are they going to have that done by? So you can see that when all of those three pieces are there and done well, condition, behavior, and criteria, you are going to have a SMART goal. Okay? Clear so far? Hopefully, okay. So Now I want to get into those components in a little more detail and give some examples to help people understand. So when we're talking about condition, right, we're talking about the circumstances, so materials, time, place. So here's some different examples in different kind of broad areas: academic, social, independent living, that you might see. So this first example, given a set of 20 math problems requiring two-digit subtraction. When you're looking at that, if you're a parent, because you're all parents, right? You're looking at that. Does that give you a pretty clear idea of what is going to be needed, what's happening, what is the situation and the circumstances under which this goal is going to be done, right? We know we're asking the child to do a set of 20 math problems. We know those math problems are going to require two-digit subtraction. So there's some clear conditions around that, right? What they're doing and what it is that even that level that they're doing that. When greeted by his peers during transitions between classes and lunchtime, right? So again, the condition, we know it's during transitions between classes, and we know it's during lunchtime. And we also know we're looking for situations where not where the student is actually being asked to initiate greeting. That might be a skill we ask for later. Right now, when greeted by his peers, so we're asking for the student to respond to a greeting. So that clear condition is set up. So you look at it and you go, okay, the condition is there for the student to, and we'll get to the behavior, to do whatever that behavior is. After listening to the audio recording of the literature, a book, story, for example, being studied in her 8th grade English class. So again, we know that we're going to need to provide an audio recording of literature that's presented in the 8th grade English class. We know it's the 8th grade English class, so it's 8th grade curriculum. And we know we're talking about specific literature, books, short stories, maybe a play, right? So again, there's some clear conditions. So any teacher seeing this goes, oh, I need to make sure there's audio recordings for this. The general ed teacher will need to know that. The administrator, it's clear and laid out for them what kinds of things need to be there and what needs to be provided here. At snack time, when given step-by-step directions in a visual format. Again, there's a specific period where we're really going to work on this skill, right? During snack time, not during lunchtime, not after school, not during math class, at snack time, right? This is when that goal is going to be addressed. When given step-by-step directions in a visual format. So now we know the student's going to have, again, some supports there, right? Those step-by-step directions. And we know the student is going to have them in a visual format, right? So that, again, can get to some of that strength-based, right? If we know that the student is a visual learner and does well with visual supports, we're putting that in there in the condition. And again, I'll talk about that a little more. And then sometimes it's a very simple one. When given a verbal prompt to begin work, right? This could probably even be added to a little bit when given throughout the day or in math class. So you could provide a little more specificity in here. And I was kind of writing these last minute, so I probably would have added that. But you can see, right? You know, it's a situation where it's time to begin work and the student has received a verbal prompt for that to happen. So it's not something else going on in the classroom, like a bell or a bell ringing or some other visual signal out there. They're actually going to get the verbal prompt, time to start working. Okay, so those are examples of condition. Can you start to see how that's specific there? How it can be relevant? And sometimes even time bound in terms of when things happen. Excuse me. Now, again, the behavior states exactly what the student will do. We want it in observable, measurable terms, because if you can't see it, you can't measure it. Okay, it has to be something that you know you can see and measure. And again, you want it to be really specific. So for example, Lee will write the answers to the problems, showing regrouping as needed. So it's not going to be that Lee is going to do this on the computer, right? It's going to be that he's writing the answer and he's going to show his work, right? So we know it's observable. We can see that he's written the answers. We can see his regrouping work on the paper, observable, and we can measure whether that was done and done correctly. Taylor will look directly at the peer and say hello in an audible voice. Again, see the specificity of that? It's not just Taylor will say hello to a peer. We want him to do it, or her, I can't remember, looking directly at the peer and saying hello, but not but saying in an audible voice, hi, hello, right? And you can put in quotes whatever word you want them to use, or you cannot use quotes and greet the peer greet them in an audible voice. But again, can you observe someone looking directly at someone else? You can. Can you observe and know whether something was said audibly? You can. And you can measure both, observable, measurable. Alex will verbally describe one main character and one major plot point. So we're not asking Alex to write something. We're going to allow her to use her strength in verbal skills to describe a main character and a major plot point. You can even be more specific with that and say, describe a main character with 2 adjectives and 1 major plot point, right? So you can even be more specific if and when appropriate. But you can observe that and you can measure that. Sam will follow the steps to make a fruit smoothie. And this does connect back to that earlier one, right? You know, they've got the visual, the directions with the visual prompts. So Sam will follow the steps to make a fruit smoothie. We can observe and we can measure following of those steps. And we know the steps are going to be for a fruit smoothie. Now you could make this broader too. Follow the steps to make a snack, right? If you want Sam to learn a whole bunch of different snacks, depending on where they're at. But maybe for this year, we just want Sam to make a fruit smoothie because Sam loves fruit smoothies and Sam can only do one of the 20 steps so far. So this year, we're just going to get Sam to make that fruit smoothie all by themselves. Okay? But again, observable, measurable. Chris will begin working within 30 seconds. So here's that, we call that latency, the time that a behavior starts. So we know that we want a short latency there, right? Chris isn't going to be able to just mess around for a while and 5 minutes later say, but I started, right? 30 seconds, right? A little time for processing, a little time for organizing, and then we want Chris to begin working. Because right now we know it takes him 5 to 10 minutes every time. We want to shorten that latency period before Chris works. And then remain on task for 10 minutes. Again, probably pulling that back to how long is Chris staying on task right now? If Chris is already staying on task for 8 minutes, adding 2 minutes in a year is probably not a good yearly goal. But if Chris is staying on task for 1 minute, 10 minutes in a year, especially if it's a young kid, might be very appropriate, right? Maybe you're going to ask in a year, 30 minutes. So it does go back to baseline, and we'll talk about that as well. But again, can you see observable, measurable? You're really specific, and it's something that can be seen and measured. Which brings us to criteria. So this is how we establish how we know the goal was met, how we know the student achieved the goal, right? And again, it can be in terms of accuracy, independence, duration, number of trials, and how it will be measured. It's not uncommon for more than one form of criteria to be present, independence and accuracy, right? How many opportunities? Okay, there's often more than one form of criteria present. When you're thinking about criteria, and I was talking about this in the behavior too, but criteria should be determined by baseline data. So when there's a goal written, you want to have an idea of where that student is already performing, right? And if it's at 0% because they've never done it before, that's fine, but that's going to help you determine what's achievable in a year or what might be achievable. So you always want to have an idea of where the student is at now with that skill, so you can make sure that it's an appropriate criteria where kind of there's something we call the zone of proximal development where the goal is in a place where it will be challenging for the student, but achievable for the student. It won't bring them too much frustration, but it also won't be too easy and they've got this in a month, right? So having that baseline data and understanding where the child is at now will help determine what that appropriate criteria is. Okay. See where we're at. Oh, okay, we're doing fine. I want to make sure I'm leaving some good time for questions. So strength-based SMART goals, and I've kind of talked about this and alluded to this. I keep going back to those present levels of performance and talking about goals because the goals really do need to come from those present levels of performance. And your input as a parent into those present levels of performance is so important because that, again, is how the goals are built. But as I said, present levels of performance should not only address areas of need, but also areas of strength and what the students can do. So you as parents, but also when appropriate, your child are particularly important in providing information as to what a child's strengths and interests are, because it's okay to have goals that relate to interests, right? That condition piece is a great place to incorporate interests. When reading an 8th grade passage on the history of trains, when reading a passage about, I once had a student who was just mad for volcanoes or the Civil War, right? Areas of interest, because that's going to keep that student engaged, and having that in the condition can help ensure that as that instruction is going on, we're bringing in that child's interest. And then the same with the strengths, right? Strengths and area, and these strengths and these interests are often addressed in the condition and or the behavior, right? So when we're talking about what behavior the student will do, we want to allow them to demonstrate skill, to demonstrate knowledge using their strengths. If they are a visual learner, then we want to look at, are we providing visual supports in the condition? If we know that the student, that they don't, handwriting, man, it's not, that you're not going to get the best work from the student. You're not really going to be able to see what they really know and what they really can do. But if they can type on a computer, man, what they're going to do. If they can dictate something, we're really going to understand and be able to see what they can do, right? Those are those strength-based. And so that can be part of the behavior, what we're asking them to do. So we're asking them to do something in the way that will best allow them to demonstrate what they know and what they can do, right? So when we're writing those goals, thinking about those strengths, thinking about those interests, and incorporating those into the condition and or the behavior can be a great way to make sure that you not only have SMART goals, but they are strengths-based SMART goals. Okay, so now we're gonna have a little game. And I'm gonna ask for a little audience participation in this. I've got a whole bunch of goals and we're gonna play, is it a SMART goal or not? So you can talk, you can give me a thumbs up. I can't remember if one of the reactions is a is a thumbs down or not. I can't remember what all the reactions are, but so let's look at this first goal.
There's a crying face that might work instead of a thumbs down.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay. So you can participate as you are comfortable, right? You can verbally say, you can write in the chat. I'm not very good at lecturing and checking chat, but you can do that. You can give the thumbs up. You can give the crying face. What's it called? Reaction, however you want to do that. But here's our first goal. And I start off kind of easy. Alex will complete his math work in class every day. Is that a SMART goal? SMART or not? Christine has the good laughing face. And I think other people maybe are not. I don't know if people are writing in the chat. Nope, good. Okay, thumbs down. Awesome. Correct. No, it is not a SMART goal. But why not? Does anybody have an idea of why this isn't a SMART goal? And you can just say one thing, you can type in the chat.
Definitely not specific.
Not specific. Is it measurable? Not really. I mean, is it achievable every day in class? I don't know anybody who completes their math work every day in class. So it's probably not achievable. Is it relevant? Maybe, but we don't have enough specifics to really know if it's relevant. Is it time-based? Is this for 1 day, 2 days, a whole year, a month? We don't know. So yes, not a SMART goal. Number 2, by October 2022, after listening to the audio recording of the literature, book, short story, etc., being studied in her 8th grade English class, Alex will verbally describe one main character and one major plot point with 100% independence and accuracy across 5 different pieces of literature as measured by teacher data by date. And I have the by twice. So is that SMART or not SMART? Christine says, yes, it is a SMART goal. Why is it a SMART goal? Is there a clear condition that is specific? Is the goal measurable? Is there a clear behavior that we can observe? Is it achievable? Is it relevant? If Alex is in her 8th grade English class, probably relevant. Time-based, we've said when she's gonna do it by, right? So that's why it is a SMART goal. Okay, let's try a little harder. Given 22-digit subtraction problems, Chris will demonstrate understanding of the concept of regrouping with 80% accuracy, 9 out of 10 problem sets as measured by student work samples by date. SMART or not? So I've got one SMART. And I purposely made these a little tricky. So we've got one person who thinks it's SMART. Does anybody think it's not SMART? Or people scratching their heads? So let me take you through and ask a question. Is there a clear condition given 22-digit subtraction problems? Thumbs up if you think there's a clear condition. Right? That's pretty clear. 22-digit subtraction problems. Could be a little more specific. Achievable is a good question, and let's think about why. Chris will demonstrate understanding of the concept of regrouping. Is that observable?
That was where I got stuck. Like, how will they demonstrate the concept?
Exactly. That's why it's not SMART. Because how are they going to demonstrate understanding? Is a flashlight going to pop over his head? We can think of lots and lots of ways to demonstrate understanding, but which one are we going to choose, right? How will we know he's demonstrating understanding? Can he just say, oh yeah, I understand regrouping. Yeah, it's when you cross out the number and you put the number on top and then move it over, right? There's no clear, observable, measurable behavior there. Demonstrating understanding isn't the same as writing an answer, stating the correct answer, something we can see, something we can measure. So that's why it's not SMART. There's a pretty clear criteria there. And yes, it's hard to know if it's achievable because we don't know baseline, but that demonstrate understanding, when you see kind of nebulous terms like that, like understand or, those things that can't really be measured, it's okay in an IEP meeting to say, what do you mean by demonstrate understanding? What is it that you want Chris to do? How will we know Chris understands? Can we be more specific about that? Right? That's why it's not SMART. When given a verbal prompt to begin work, Lee will begin working within 30 seconds and remain on task for 10 minutes with 100% accuracy. SMART or not? Do we have a clear condition? We've got that verbal prompt to be given for work. Can you observe someone begin working within 30 seconds and remain on task for 10 minutes? You can, with 100% accuracy. How do we measure the accuracy? Right. How do we measure the accuracy of starting and remaining on task? Right? It's more maybe about independence. We don't really have a clear criteria there, right? It's more likely that you would say with independence than accuracy, right? Accuracy is generally more for like specific skills, like some of those academic skills, and less so about behavior.
I don't know if I can stay on task for 10 minutes with 100% accuracy.
Well, I feel you on that one. It's also not time bound, right? When is he going to do this? When is he going to do this by? We don't have that time bound piece. We don't know for how long he's going to have to do that. So there's not clear criteria here. We're not really going to be able to know when Lee has met this goal. It's not clear how we know that he's met it. So that's why it's not SMART. Okay, we got 2 more to go. When greeted by his peers during transitions between classes and lunchtime, Taylor will look directly at the peer and say hello in an audible voice without prompting, 4 out of 5 opportunities as measured by weekly or not. It is SMART, right? We've got that clear condition. We know when it's going to happen. We've got a clear, observable, measurable behavior that Taylor's going to do. And we have clear criteria without prompting, 4 out of 5 opportunities. We know how the data is going to be taken, right? That's another important piece, that measured by how are we measuring it? How is that data going to happen? And will there be data? And by, there's time bound. So that's why it's SMART. Last one. Sam will follow the steps to make a fruit smoothie with 100% independence, 4 out of 5 opportunities as measured by task analysis data by date. Smart or not? Christine, why is it not smart?
It doesn't seem very, like, there's not a lot of detail. What is meant by task analysis data? I don't know. It's also, you don't know if it's achievable based on, it depends on what the original condition was.
Exactly. Yes, it's missing the condition. And with the condition, that task analysis data would be more clear. Task analysis is when we break a task down into its component steps, and we see whether and how well the student can progress on completing each of the steps. So it's missing that condition where we talk about following the directions, all of the verbal. There's no clear condition here. So task analysis data, it is talking about data, but Christine, you raise a really great point here. A goal can be a SMART goal, but if you're not clear about how something might be measured or what that condition is or what the behavior is, it is absolutely appropriate to ask, because the next thing you can do when you say, what's a task analysis? And it's explained to you, if you wanted your child to make, or Sam, if Sam's your kiddo and you want Sam to make smoothies at home, you might be able to get a copy of that task analysis so you can even work on following those steps at home, right? So you've got that nice consistency between home and school, but you don't have to make the task analysis. You don't have to put those directions together. But if you collaborate with the teacher, you can make sure you're talking about the same materials and things that you have at home that they would have at school. So yes, this last one is not smart because it's missing a clear condition. We don't know what the specifics are around those steps to make a fruit smoothie. Okay. So something that I always really talk about, because I think it's so important, and you've probably kind of heard me talk about it, is collaborating and collaboration. One thing that I always say is that when teachers and families are working in opposite direction, it's the child who's being pulled apart. And so it's really important that we collaborate and parents and teachers work together and that collaboration happens. Collaboration is not all one or any person's responsibility. Everybody on the team needs to be collaborating. But when we collaborate with school professionals on the IEP, it's an important part of being able to create strengths-based IEPs with those SMART goals, because everybody's going to be on the same page. Everybody's going to have the same understanding, and everybody's going to feel that their priorities, including the child, are being addressed, and that to the greatest extent possible, right? We may not always be able to have all of our priorities met, parents, teachers, anyone, child, right, at any given time. But that collaboration is so important. So some of the ways that you can help with this is review the previous year's IEP and your child's progress. So, and think about, are there any areas on there that you're like, yeah, we got to keep working on that. We got to keep working on that. There may be other areas where you're like, yeah, this isn't relevant anymore, or he's got it, or whatever. But as a parent, you probably have some areas and things that you think about that you're like, you know, it's really important to my child or our family or our long-term goals or his long-term goals to address these specific areas. And having thought about that and thought that through before you come to the meeting, and I'm sure most people do, right, puts you in a better place. But then that brings you to the next part. IEP meetings, right, they're so formal and you've got all the people around the table. When I was teaching, I always found it, and as a parent, when I was working with professionals, I always found it to be much more productive to reach out to the teacher, or when I was a teacher, to reach out to the parents prior to the IEP meeting, to have those discussions and conversations in a little bit more informal, casual, comfortable way, where people really felt comfortable sharing their goals, where I could sit down and really talk about, what are your child's strengths, right? Here's what I'm seeing that they do really, really well. And I've noticed that when I give things visually, that, gosh, he does it so well. And you might say, my child is so into X right now. And I notice that when I am at home and I'm asking them to do something, and if I can kind of incorporate that, he's just doing much better, and I can really get him to do things. Sharing of that information and sharing about your child and about your situation really can lead to a really strong IEP and really great, specific, relevant goals, because that relevancy is so important. And the collaboration piece is what will allow the greatest amount of relevancy in those goals. Another thing that I always say, if there are new supports or services, maybe it's technology you think would be beneficial, maybe it's a service that you think that your child could benefit from, that you think your child needs to be successful, communicating those in advance to the district can be helpful, because it ensures that they can have the right people at the table to discuss those supports and services. Now, if you want to increase your chances of getting those supports and services, make it easy for the district to say yes. So explain clearly why you think the benefit would be. Try and do something in a way that the district can see how getting that support and service is going to make not only your child's life better and progress, but it's not too much on the teacher, for example, right? That by having that supports and services, it's going to enable the teacher to have an easier time helping your child progress, right? So those kinds of things, and communicating beforehand and being clear and asking them what they see, right? So you can have an idea if they're like, I don't know about that, and here's why. You can maybe look more further into that and decide if that's something, is there another way to get what I want? And if not, then what kinds of evidence and support do I want to bring to say, this is why my child needs this. And here's why I think we really need to do it, right? But the more advanced preparation that you can have, the more likely you're going to have success. And building those relationships, particularly with the classroom teacher, can really help with that, with those SMART goals. And sometimes you may even be in a situation where you can sit and as a team actually write those goals together. Some districts, it's harder depending on the number of goals, depending on the amount of time. But if you can't do it at the meeting, sometimes having that earlier meeting with the teacher, you can really get a lot of input and really have a really strong role in writing those goals and ensuring that they're SMART. Okay. Then there's a couple of resources here, because I always love to give resources. If you don't know about understood.org, it's a wonderful organization that has a lot of great materials for kids with learning differences, great information about differences, great ways to support kiddos. It's a great resource. Wright's Law, this had some information on SMART IEPs. If you don't know about wrightslaw.com, I think they're also really fantastic. They know the law really, really well. They can put it in layman's terms. You can ask questions. They're fabulous. And then this SMART goals definition, that's an earlier definition. It's about SMART goals, so you can get an idea. There's some nice visuals in there. It does have it more from that business end, but it kind of gives you an idea of where it came from and a little more information about that. And that's all I have in terms of the presentation, but now we can stop the recording if Christine wants to go ahead and do that. And I will stop sharing, and I am happy to answer any questions that